Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 5-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. Also keep in mind the slate locks around 4 o'clock Eastern time, not our typical 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if you have your contest reserved, don't miss out on drafting your lineups. We are starting around 4 p.m. today. We have an early start. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players. They cover the sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. Also, you'll get notified when I go live. I go live every single weekend for NASCAR, or just whenever the NASCAR race is, I go live that day to answer some questions and come and hang out. We usually got a few hundred people in there. So if you're interested, you should start checking those out because NASCAR is a great DFS sport. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter, cpen16 on IG. And if you want to support my content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We got over 300 people there. You can hop into the Discord chat, ask me all the questions you want all day, or just come in and hang out. It doesn't matter to me. You can get the cheat sheet, the top stacks tool, data sheets, all that fun stuff. So if you're interested, links in the description below. If you're not, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So the pitching on this slate, it's okay. I mean, Yu Darvish is the clear spend up option. I think he's in the best spot, and I think we're just going to have to end up spending up for him. The thing is, bats are once again pretty free on the slate, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue just spending up for Yu Darvish, and I think he just grades out as the best option. Now, after Yu Darvish, it gets a little bit tricky because, look, Glasnow and Chris Paddack are pretty good pitchers, but they're not in the best spots in the world. I know Boston hasn't been that great this season, but they certainly have some bats that could pose trouble. JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers. So it's not a walk in the park for Glasnow. We also have pitch count issues because we know he's not going to go 100 plus pitches. Then we have Chris Paddack, who's a good pitcher and at a fine price tag, but he's going up against the Dodgers, which is about as bad of a matchup you can ask for as a right-handed pitcher. I mean, they just absolutely crush right-handed pitching, and Vegas doesn't really like him either. So tough spots for these guys. Desclafani and Arrieta are just fine options to me, but let's start up top. We have Yu Darvish, 10,400 after a shaky start to the season. He has bounced back with 220 plus point outings in a row versus Pittsburgh and KC. Now, it actually first start of the season, it was versus this Milwaukee team, who we only scored 8.8 points against, but they have been striking out a ton versus righties this season. We just saw Kenta Maeda put up like 20, 24 fantasy points versus them, and you got to like Yu Darvish here. I mean, he's got plenty of strikeout upside, and also the wind is blowing in Chicago right now. There is no implied team total yet. Usually when there's a wind threat for this game or in Chicago, the total usually comes out later in the day, but I'd have to imagine that the Brewers are going to have the lowest team total in the slate, if not close to it. Desclafani with only 3.84 runs against him is pretty low, but I still think it's going to be below that. Yu Darvish can overpower any lineup. He's got the strikeout upside. If you're looking at his numbers last year, he had a 31% K rate. Now, the strikeouts really haven't been there too much for Darvish this season. He's had 5, 7, and 4, but they're going to come eventually. I mean, last season he had a 31% K rate, 3.39 xFIP, and like I said, this Brewers team has been striking out quite a bit versus righties, so I like Yu Darvish as your spend-up option, and when we go to the bats, you're going to see that they're just absolutely free in good spots, so you can pretty much play Yu Darvish with no concerns of constricting your lineup. Now, I don't know if I'd want to play Darvish and Glasnow together yet. It is doable because, look, these guys, there's a lot of cheap bats on this slate, so it's really not that hard to fit them in. So I wouldn't hate it if you did it, but I don't know. I think it's fine because Glasnow is obviously a really good pitcher. Now, his last 2 starts, he hasn't been as sharp. His first start of the season, when he was limited to like 4 innings, he struck out 9 batters, and he looked amazing. It was versus Atlanta. Then his next start versus Baltimore, he only scored 12 points. And then versus the Yankees, he kind of got beat up a little bit. He had 3 walks, and he's actually been struggling with walks so far this season. He had 2 in his first start, 3 in his next one, and then 3 in his last one. But 9 strikeouts, 5 strikeouts, 5 strikeouts. The farthest we've seen him go is 88 pitches so far, which is not going to be too deep into a game. Innings-wise, he's went 4.2, which is the longest. But he hasn't been as great the past 2 outings, but he is just, I'm going to side with the talent here. I think he's a fine option. I don't know if I'd really play Glasnow with Darvish. Again, you have the salary to do it, so I wouldn't hate it. And really, any of these pitchers aren't great options. So if you want to just play the talent game and lock in Darvish and Glasnow and just to get the 2 most talented pitchers on the slate, I have no problem with that because you should be able to do it with how free some of these Tampa Bay Rays bats are. But he's a fine option. He's pitching in Boston, which isn't my favorite. But if you're looking at his numbers last year, he was fantastic. Now, I know those numbers aren't on par this season yet, but he had a 33% K rate, limited to hard contact, only 0.59 home runs per 9 innings, 2.94 xFIP, good versus lefties, good versus righties. he's a fine option. I mean, the matchup's okay. 4.27 runs against him, 6.5 strikeouts in Vegas, but I don't know. He's not going to go too deep into a game. I think we're going to be lucky if he sees 5 innings. I mean, he'll have to be efficient if he wants to get 5+ innings, but if he does, I think there's a good chance he could pick up the win because I do like the race stack on this slate. So he's an interesting option. If you're spending up for one of the two, I much prefer Darvish because he's got a legit chance to go 100 pitches, and Glasnow obviously does not. So we'll see, but ranking them, it'd be Darvish, Glasnow, but that also comes with the $1,300 price difference as well. Then dropping down to Chris Paddack, 8,500. He actually did fine in his first start versus the Dodgers earlier this season, where he struck out 5 over 6 innings and actually at 18.5 fantasy points, which is actually the most fantasy points he's had all season. Actually, I take that back. He had 22 versus Arizona, but I mean, he's fine. I mean, obviously, he's a good pitcher. We know Chris Paddack obviously has a lot of talent, 27% K rate last season, 4.05 xFIP. Now, did give up quite a bit of fly balls in hard contact, 42% hard contact rate, 42% fly ball rate. And there's definitely a lot of good lefties in this lineup. If you're looking at his splits, he did give up a 192 ISO to lefties last season, and the strikeout rate was 7% lower as well. So there's concern here. It's not an easy matchup whatsoever. So I don't think Chris Paddack is just an easy lock into 8,500 because the Dodgers can go off for 10 runs at a given moment. You have Max Muncy, you have Cody Bellinger, Jack Peterson, not Corey Seager anymore, but even you got some good righties in Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, and some guys I'm probably forgetting off the top of my head, but I like the price for Chris Paddack, but the matchup sucks. But again, on this slate, there's just not that many good SP2 options, so we're probably going to have to be forced to make some uncomfortable decisions. But someone Vegas really likes is Anthony DeSclafani here. He comes in at 8,200, and he's only got 3.84 runs against him. And he's only made 2 starts this season, but he's been pretty good at them. He scored 13 points and 27 fantasy points. Now, his first start he only threw 64 pitches, but he's yet to allow a run, and then his last start against the Brewers, he had 27. He went 6 innings, allowed 2 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, and went 88 pitches. Gets a really soft matchup here versus Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh does not strike out a lot versus righties, but they're a pretty soft matchup overall. I mean, they have a couple of decent lefties here, and we know with DeSclafani, he does struggle with lefties with a double-digit walk rate, but he's much better versus righties. But it's not like he's awful versus lefties, but the numbers certainly aren't great. But I think DeSclafani is actually a pretty fine SP2 option. Vegas likes him if you're looking at Pittsburgh splits versus righties. Only an 18% strikeout rate, which again, as I said, is very, very low. They don't strike out at all versus righties. But a 168 ISO, 99 WRC plus 324 WOBA. And we've actually seen them strike out quite a bit versus some righties this season. So I think those numbers are going to go up quite a bit. But Vegas likes him, 63% chance for the win, which is one of the highest on the entire slate, and only 3 runs against him. So DeSclafani is looking like a pretty good option at SP2 currently. And then we have Jake Arrieta. He comes in at 7,300. And look, if Zach Eflin could strike out 10 Orioles, I think Jake Arrieta can have a pretty solid game. I'm not expecting 10 strikeouts whatsoever from Jake Arrieta. But Eflin had an 18% K rate. He came in and just racked up them Ks, and Arrieta has a 19% strikeout rate last season. And I think he can have a decent game here. He wasn't great in his first start versus the Yankees, but I mean, we kind of got to give him a pass there. It is the New York Yankees, and they can. I mean, they really got the Tyler Glasnow. Tyler Glasnow's got some of the best talent in the entire league. But in his last start versus the Braves, he scored 27 fantasy points. He went 6 innings, didn't give up a run, 6 strikeouts, and went 89 pitches. So I think Arrieta's fine here. I could see him being popular just because we saw Zach Eflin have a really good game versus him last night. I believe he had around 20 fantasy points, 10 strikeouts. Not expecting Arrieta to rack up 10 strikeouts, but I like him here. He's 7,300. I mean, only 4 runs against them, 63% chance for the win, only 4.5 strikeouts in Vegas, but this is merely just a play that you hope goes 5 innings and gets you a win and doesn't get just absolutely shelled. So Arrieta, he makes sense for an SP2 option, pairing him up with Yu Darvish, but really any of these guys are playable. I don't have a strong lean on either because it's just kind of a meh SP2 slate. SP1, it's obvious. It's Yu Darvish, but I mean, after that, it's kind of a little tricky. But we'll move on to the bats now. Just give me a second to click on it. And then it's pretty much the same slate as yesterday for the most part, but I'm also liking some of these Reds lefties. But for the most part, you play your Phillies and you play your Tampa Bay Rays because they have, I believe, the 2 highest implied team totals on this slate. The Phillies are at 5.45 and the Rays are at 5.23, and I believe that's the two highest on the slate. And the Reds are at 5.16. So I'm pretty much playing Reds. Well, I shouldn't have said that in that order. I'm playing Phillies, Rays, and Reds on this slate for the most part. There's only 5 games, so there's not going to be a lot of options. And these guys were super chalk last night, and I expect them to be even more chalkier today because there's even less options here. But Starting up top, we have JT Realmuto, 5,300. He's super expensive, but I do think he's an elite option here going against Tom Eshelman. You pretty much want all the Phillies here. The Baltimore Orioles pitching staff sucks, and the bullpen sucks as well. And they had the highest team total in the slate at 5.45. And it's just going to be hard not to lock all these guys in. Now, if you're looking at JT's splits last season versus righties, he's fine versus both sides of the plate, but a 206 ISO, 107 WRC plus, a 275 batting average. And if you're looking at Eshelman's splits last year, he actually gave up more power to righties, but for both sides of the plate, you can target these guys. He sucks versus both, but versus righties, over a 300 ISO given up, a 13% K rate, and a 427 WOBA. And versus lefties, he's not good either. 241 ISO given up, 13% K rate, 333 WOBA, but just lock and load all these Phillies bats. Get as many in your lineup as you can. For the most part, they should be able to smash once again. Then if you want some cheaper options, we have Tucker Barnhart, 2,900. I do like those Cincinnati lefties versus Trevor Williams. Williams is a okay pitcher, but he really struggles with lefties. Only a 12% K rate compared to 21% to righties. And in your double-digit walk rate and your 400 WOBA given up and a 226 ISO. So we can definitely use some lefties here. And Barnhart, he's going to make the lineup over Casale since we got a righty on the mound, and he's got some okay splits versus lefties, versus righties. It's nothing special, but he's only 2,900. And if you're stacking Reds, you use Barnhart. If you're stacking Rays, you use Zunino. If you're stacking Phillies, you use Realmuto. Now I know Realmuto is about $3,000 more expensive, but you can find a way to do it. And then Mike Zunino, I mean, he's really just if you're playing the Rays. Now if you're looking at splits last season versus lefties, they were actually terrible, but Cowhart's making his first start of the year. Now, I heard he was actually looking pretty good in inter-squad games, but I'm going to trust the Rays here in Vegas Vegas is going to as well. And then just the Boston pitching staff has just been pretty horrendous this season. Rays scored, I believe, 9 runs last night, and I think they're going to make some noise once again. And checking my top stacks tool, they graded out as the best value once again. And their average projected starting lineup salary is only $3,400 today with a team total of 5.23. So pretty good value there for the Rays, and I think we can certainly stack these guys up. Now, I'm not going to have any numbers on Kyle Hart because he hasn't made any starts yet in the big leagues, but, I mean, you got to like the Rays here. Then dropping down to first base, we have some decent value options, so I'm not really looking to spend up too much here. But Joey Votto seems a little bit expensive, but $4,400. I do like the lefties versus Trevor Williams. I already mentioned this, so I won't talk about it again, but the Reds do have an implied team total of over 5. We're also going to be in Cincinnati, which is Great American Ballpark, which, if you guys don't know, is a great park for hitting. So this is definitely a boost for the Cincinnati bats here. And if you're looking at Votto's splits last season versus righties, not a ton of power, but 270 batting average, only an 18% walk rate, or 18% strikeout rate, 361 on base percentage. He's fine versus a righty, especially the one that can't strike out lefties. But the chalk guy, I would assume, is going to be Rhys Hoskins here at 4,100. You're pretty much playing as many Phillies as you can, and when you can get a cheap one like Rhys Hoskins, we're going to do it. Now, he has struggled so far to start the season, and he is better versus lefties compared to righties. But again, it's Baltimore. I don't really care who's on the mound. We can pretty much stack whoever here on the Phillies. And they have the highest team total on the slate, and Rhys Hoskins still has over 200 ISO versus right-handed pitching last season, but the batting average is only 215. But I like all the Phillies here. Rhys Hoskins has a good price tag, and I think we can pretty much just load every single one of them up. And Eshelman, over a 300 ISO given up to righties. He doesn't typically strike out many guys, so definitely like Rhys. You use Rhys if you're stacking. Look, it's the same thing as above. You're using Votto if you're stacking Reds. You're using Rhys if you're stacking Phillies. Then you use Jose Martinez if you're stacking the Rays. So it just kind of falls into the line once again. But Jose Martinez going against the lefty, I like the Rays quite a bit. They're on the road too, so you get the guaranteed ninth inning at bats, and it's also a good park for hitting. Major boosts from the Trop. And if you're looking at Jose Martinez splits versus lefties last season, he had a 330 batting average, 160 WRC plus, a 414 WOBA, and a 271 ISO. So definitely like Jose Martinez. But again, just depends on what team you're using in your lineups. But I think in cash games, you're probably just sticking on Rhys Hoskins for the most part, just because, I like the Phillies the best on this slate, and he's fairly priced as well. Then dropping down to second base. I don't really like Adam Frazier that much, but there's not much to like at all at second base. I only have 2 guys listed here. I was only going to have Mike Rosselló listed, but I was like, well, I should probably list more than just one second baseman, so I did throw Adam Frazier on here going against DeSclafani. DeSclafani's a fine pitcher, but if you're going to use anybody versus him, you want lefties, and if you're looking at splits versus lefties last season, over a 200 ISO, giving up a double-digit walk rate, and the numbers really do fall off compared to righties. So if you're using anybody versus DeSclafani, I'd prefer the lefties here, but Adam Frazier's really the only guy that wasn't too interesting in Pittsburgh for me. You could also look at Josh Bell, but for the most part, I'm kind of just avoiding Pittsburgh. And then the chalk guy, Mike Rosselló, 3,400. Price came up a little bit from the last game, but I think he just scored 22, 25 points around there. But he's going to be leading off versus a lefty, and it's going to be hard just not to lock him in at second base. Second base is not a great position today, and when you can just lock in a 3400 guy leading off versus a lefty that excels versus lefties for one of the best teams on the slate, you pretty much just do it and move on. I just would rather get different somewhere else. But if you're looking at his numbers versus lefties last year, 200 ISO, 300 batting average, so I don't really have to go too in depth here. I mean, Mike Brissett is just a pretty good play. And I'm going to 100% be locking him in cash games. As long as he makes the lineup, I don't see why he wouldn't, though. And then dropping down to third base, and again, not many options here, but I do like Manny Machado going up against the lefty and Julio Urias. Now, Machado, he is super good versus lefties. If you're looking at splits last season, 315 batting average, 685 slugging, 177 WRC plus, and a 370 ISO with a 441 WOBA. He was one of the best lefty smashers last season. Now, to be honest, I'm just going to play Yandy Diaz because he's dirt cheap. Like I said, you can just easily stack in the Rays. And like Zunino's 2,900, Brissett is 34, Martinez is 39, Adames is 3,000, and then Renfroe is 3,400. So it's really easy to fit in the Rays, which is why I said you could fit in Glass now and Yu Darvish pretty easily today. Now, if you're stacking the Phillies, it won't be as easy because they are priced up just a little bit, but they're still not going to break the bank either. But forget why I got that on that tangent. But anyway, Manny Machado, he's a fine play just overall. If you're looking at your Urias' splits last season, he's a good pitcher, obviously. Only a .094 ISO given up to righties, but I'm going to give the advantage to Manny Machado here. But I'm not really looking to use the Padres much. I mean, they only have a 3.95 implied team total, but I think Machado is fine as a one-off at that price tag versus a lefty because he absolutely crushes them. And then we have Chris Bryant. So the wind's blowing in, so I'm not that interested in the Cubs. But anytime Bryant's going up against a lefty, I'll certainly have some interest. Now, Brett Anderson is projected to be used as the opener. Then Corbin Burns is going to come in as the long relief. So we'll see how long Anderson goes. But Bryant, he smashes lefties. Near 300 batting average, 333 ISO. Pretty much the same numbers as Manny Machado. Like, I'm not looking to stack the Cubs here, but he's fine as a one-off. So it's pretty much the same play as Machado. But the guy I'm just going to end up playing, which I'll just be honest with you guys, Yandy Diaz, 3,100. It's just going to be hard not to play Yandy Diaz here. I mean, he's only 3,100. Gets going against a lefty. And if you're looking at splits versus lefties last season, 272 ISO, 311 batting average, 158 WRC plus. He's making his first start. They're on the road in Boston. They have the second highest team total on the slate. Hard not to just plug in a guy that's 3,100, and you can easily pair him up with Brissett with 3,400. I mean, if you guys stack the Rays tonight, you can do whatever you want with their lineups, and I think they're in an elite spot as well. I'm not sure why they're this cheap, to be honest. Then dropping down to shortstop, we have Didi Gregorius, 4,700. They priced him up quite a bit, but look, I like him versus lefties. I also like him versus righties, and Tom Eshelman sucks versus both sides of the plate. So just feel free to load up these Phillies. Now, Didi Gregorius is a little expensive here, so I could see him going a little bit overlooked, but then again, shortstop is pretty barren on this slate. I only found 3 options I liked. So I pretty much just threw in a Phillies bat, a Reds bat, and a Rays bat. It's pretty much the same thing going up and down. So it just depends on what you have more in your lineup. Like if you're stacking Phillies, Didi, Galvis for the Reds, and then Adames for the Rays. It's pretty much that simple today, in my opinion. But Eshelman sucks versus both sides of the plate, and I like the Phillies a lot. So Didi obviously makes sense. Freddie Galvis, 3,300. So he's probably like the third option I like here, but he's fine. I like the Reds lefties here, and he's a switch hitter. And they have a team total of 5.16, and they're also in Cincy. It's a good park for left-handed power. Now, Galvis obviously isn't like a home run kind of guy, but he still has a 200 ISO versus right-handed pitching, 250 batting average, and a 26% K. That's not that great, but Trevor Williams just typically does not get strikeouts versus left-handed bats, or on the left side of the plate, I guess I should say. Or no, it would be the right side of the plate. You guys get what I'm saying. But only a 226 ISO given up to lefties, a 12% strikeout rate. I mean, Freddie Galvis is fine for the price tag. Then Willie Adames, 3,000. I think that's how you say it, Adames. I don't think it's Adam or Adames. I hope it's Adames. If it's Adames, you can correct me. But either way, he's a good play today. He's only 3,000 going up against the lefty and Kyle Hart. Obviously not the best splits in the world. He actually has better numbers versus righties, but he's going to crack the lineup here versus a lefty. And I like all the Rays, so you can certainly use Adams, as long as he's in the lineup, which he should be. Then dropping down to the outfield, we have Bryce Harper, 5,400, and I've been playing him, the past 2 days, and he's been playing pretty well. He even swept a bag last night. But you got to like all the Phillies here, and if you're full stacking Phillies, you can't leave out Bryce Harper. In cash games, I don't think it's necessary because of the price tag, but then again, you can pretty much just do whatever your lineup. So I could see Bryce Harper having quite a bit of ownership, but obviously he's going to be arguably one of the best plays in the entire slate. Phillies have the highest team total. He's the best batter there, and he can definitely do damage to both sides of the plate. Now, he actually has better numbers versus lefties compared to righties, but that doesn't mean he's got bad numbers versus righties by any means. I mean, still going to see some dark green bars here. Eshelman sucks versus both sides of the plate. The Orioles bullpen sucks. Load up your Phillies bats. Austin Meadows, 4,900. I think people will overlook Meadows because you got a lefty-on-lefty matchup, but they're going to get to the bullpen soon enough. And Meadows is still fine versus lefties. If you're looking at his splits, they're not bad. 275 batting average, 246 ISO, 120 WRC plus. I mean, they're still good numbers. I mean, he strikes out 30% of the time versus lefties, so that's the one drawback. But I still don't mind Meadows in tournaments. I'm not playing Meadows in cash games versus lefty, but in tournaments, he makes sense. So, again, if you're stacking Phillies, you got Harper. If you're stacking Rays, you got Meadows. Same premise through the entire slate, pretty much. Then we have Andrew McCutchen, 4,300. He's going to be leading off first Tom Eshelman here, and I just like all the Phillies. And he actually has better splits versus righties. Batting average 250, 226 ISO, 354 WOBA, 118 WRC plus. Better numbers compared to lefties in some categories. Only a 118 ISO versus lefties. So, and then righties also crush Eshelman as well. So McCutchen leading off obviously makes sense. Jock Peterson, 4,100. I don't love using guys versus Chris Paddock, but he does give up some lefty power, and Jock Peterson's one of the better righty smashers in the entire league. Obviously, the guy sucks versus left-handed pitching, like it's complete trash, but versus righties, 320 batting average, 571 slugging, and just really good numbers all around. So if you're in a pinch and need 4,100 for a batter, Jock Peterson does grade out pretty well for me in projections. And then just keeping the common theme here of Phillies bats and Reds bats and Rays bats, which is the next four or five batters here. But Jay Bruce, 3,800. Going to be hitting near the bottom of the order, but I like all the Phillies here for the most part. And Jay Bruce, if you're looking at splits last season versus righties, 310 ISO, 95 WRC plus, 527 slugging. Obviously, not a good batting average guy or also a contact guy. He only walks 4% of the time and has a 25% K rate, but there's definitely some home run upside here for a cheap price point. Then you also have Jesse Winker, 3,500. Just continues the theme of Reds lefties for the most part, only 3,500. Williams, very low strikeout rate versus left-handed bats. And if you're looking at Winker's splits last season versus righties, he had a 234 ISO, 519 slugging, 285 batting average, only a 16% K rate, 360 on base percentage. Yeah, Winker makes some sense if you're using some Reds bats. Adam Haseley, I apologize, I've never heard his name pronounced, but only 3,400, and he's going to be hitting to the bottom of the order, but I like all the Phillies here. And the guys that are hitting lower in the order should be lower owned, but they also have somewhat similar upside. So if you want to get a little bit different with your Phillies bats, you can play the guys that are hitting lower in the order because I think they're all excellent plays on this slate. And if you're looking at splits versus righties last season, 282 batting average, only a 55% ground ball rate, does not get me excited whatsoever with only an 18% fly ball rate, but he's a Phillies bat, so I just threw him on here for the most part. I think I have the whole entire lineup here for the most part. And then Hunter Renfroe, he should end up being one of the chalkier guys on the slate. We all like the Rays. He's only 3,400. He's very good versus left-handed pitching. 336 ISO last season, 575 slugging, high fly ball rate as well. So definitely gotta like Hunter Renfroe. I mean, he's just dirt cheap, and we all like the Rays today. And then just to end this, we have Shogo Akiyama, fun name to say, 3,000. Should be leading off here versus Trevor Williams. And we like lefties versus Trevor Williams. I'm not going to exhaust you guys with that idea. So Shogo is fine if you are stacking up some Reds or just need a value bet on this slate. But we just went through it all, so appreciate you guys watching. If you found this helpful, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really appreciate it. And if you want to support me on Patreon, you can feel free to do that. Follow me on social media. And I think that's it. NASCAR video should be out tomorrow, and I think we'll go from there. So I hope everyone enjoys their Thursday. Is today Thursday? It's Wednesday or Thursday, but either way, enjoy whatever day it is.